She almost walked past him without looking. Almost. But her 10-year-old son stopped in the middle of one of Chicago's most expensive restaurants, tugged her sleeve, and asked 4 words that would quietly reshape everything she thought she knew about success, connection, and what it actually meant to be present for the people who mattered most. The chandelier above them threw warm gold light across crystal glasses and pressed white linen. The city glittered 32 floors below, and in the far corner of the room, a man in a worn denim jacket was laughing at something a little girl had just whispered to him, laughing so genuinely that the sound cut straight through the soft piano music and the polished conversations around them. Victoria Hayes saw none of it yet. She was still reading her messages. But what happened next, before the night was over, nobody in that restaurant could have predicted. Victoria was used to places like Bellum Steakhouse. As CEO of Hayes Dynamics, one of the fastest-growing technology companies in the country, she moved through spaces like this with practiced ease. The maitre d' knew her by name. The sommelier had her preferences memorized. The other diners recognized her face from business magazines and conference panels. She wore that recognition quietly, like a second skin she had never asked for, but had learned to carry without complaint. Tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight belonged to Noah. She had promised him a proper dinner, just the two of them. No phone calls, no emails, no conversations whispered into earpieces, while he sat quietly across the table pretending not to notice. He was 10 years old, and extraordinarily good at pretending not to notice. That, more than anything, was the thing that kept her awake on quiet nights. The hostess led them toward a table near the center of the room. Noah followed without speaking, his eyes moving slowly around the restaurant in the way he always observed new places, carefully and without hurry. She assumed he was tired. School had been demanding lately, and she had not been home before 8 o'clock in 11 days. The guilt sat in her chest like a smooth stone, familiar and unwelcome. Their server arrived. Menus were opened. Water glasses were filled. Everything appeared perfectly normal. Then Noah stopped listening entirely. His gaze drifted toward the far corner of the room, and it stayed there. Victoria followed his eyes and saw, at first, nothing remarkable. A man seated at a small table near the window, with a little girl across from him. The man looked to be in his late 30s. His denim jacket was clean, but visibly worn at the cuffs. His boots were old. The little girl wore a faded blue sweater and was talking with her hands in the animated, uncensored way children talked when they felt completely safe. The man was watching her, as if she were saying the most important thing he had ever heard. "Mom," Noah said quietly. Victoria looked back at him. "What is it?" Noah tilted his head toward the corner. "That man over there." She glanced again. "What about him?" Noah studied the stranger for a long moment. "He looks happy." The answer caught her completely off guard. Around them sat attorneys and surgeons and executives, people with cars and homes and portfolios. Yet her son was watching a man in a worn jacket as though he had found something rare. Victoria watched more carefully. The little girl laughed at something the man said. He slid his dessert plate toward her without hesitation. She took the largest piece and giggled. He pretended to be deeply offended. She giggled harder. It was such a small moment, so ordinary, and yet it carried a warmth that felt strangely uncommon. "Can he sit with us?" Noah asked. Victoria set down her fork. "What did you say?" Noah met her eyes, calm and sincere. "Can he sit with us?" There was no joke in his voice, no mischief, only the simple honesty that children possessed before the world taught them to measure people by what they owned or where they sat. Victoria glanced back toward the corner table. The little girl was now carefully dividing a slice of cheesecake into 2 uneven pieces. Without hesitating, she pushed the larger piece toward her father. The man laughed softly and pushed it back. She pushed it back again. A quiet battle of generosity played out between them. "Why do you want him to sit with us?" Victoria asked. "Because he seems nice." Noah shrugged. "And he never stops paying attention to her." The word settled into Victoria like a key turning in a lock she had not known was there. Around them, conversations drifted about quarterly earnings and upcoming ski trips and investment portfolios. Noah seemed completely uninterested. His attention stayed fixed on the corner table. Victoria found herself watching too. The man leaned forward and listened as the little girl spoke. Really listened. Not while checking a phone. Not while composing responses in his head. His entire attention was hers. The little girl smiled constantly. Not the polished smile of someone performing, but the unguarded smile of someone who felt genuinely seen. Victoria felt something uncomfortable shift inside her chest. She could not remember the last time Noah had smiled that way with her. The realization did not arrive loudly. It simply settled, heavy and honest, into the space between one breath and the next. "Do you think they are happy?" Noah asked quietly. Victoria hesitated. The question felt larger than it should have. She looked toward the window, where snow had begun to drift past the glass, caught in the glow of the city lights below. Then she looked back at the father and daughter. The man's jacket was worn. The little girl's sweater had clearly been washed too many times. And yet there was a warmth at their table that seemed untouched by worry. "I think they might be," Victoria said. Noah nodded, as if that confirmed something he had suspected all along. Across the room, the little girl reached into her backpack and produced a folded piece of paper. She handed it to her father with both hands. He unfolded it slowly, carefully, the way you handled something precious. It was a drawing. Even from a distance, Victoria could see bright crayons covering the page. The man's face softened immediately. He studied it as though it belonged in a museum, pointing at different details, asking questions. The little girl answered enthusiastically, gesturing, laughing, correcting him when he misidentified something she had drawn. He treated her small creation as something genuinely worth understanding. "Dad used to look at my drawings like that," Noah said. Victoria swallowed hard. Her husband had been gone for 3 years. Noah rarely mentioned him. Yet somehow, a stranger in a worn jacket in the corner of a room had reminded her son of the thing he missed most. And for the first time that evening, Victoria understood she was no longer simply observing. She was being quietly undone. She looked at her son for a long moment. The restaurant around them faded into background noise. "You want to invite a complete stranger to our table?" she asked gently. Noah nodded. "Just for a little while." Victoria almost smiled. In her world, every introduction carried a purpose, a business connection, a social calculation, a carefully managed advantage. Noah wanted none of those things. He had simply seen someone he admired and wanted to be closer to that. Before she could respond, something shifted across the room. Near the center of the restaurant, a group of businessmen occupied a large booth. Their suits were pressed. Their watches caught the light. One of them glanced toward the corner table where the father and daughter sat. Another leaned toward a colleague and whispered something. Several of them laughed, quietly, but with an edge that carried across the room. The father appeared unaware. He was listening to his daughter describe what sounded like an extremely important school project. She used both hands to explain it. He nodded at every detail. Noah noticed the businessmen before Victoria did. "Why do they keep looking at him?" he asked. Victoria followed his gaze. The men had already returned to their own conversation. "Probably nothing," she said. But something in their expressions had unsettled her. There was a particular kind of cruelty in turning another family's dinner into background entertainment, and she felt a flicker of quiet anger she had no right to direct at anyone in particular. The father never reacted, or perhaps he had noticed and chosen not to. Victoria suspected the latter. There was a stillness about him that suggested someone familiar with being underestimated and long past caring. Then one of the businessmen stood, adjusted his jacket, and crossed the dining room. As he passed the corner table, he slowed just enough to look down at the father and daughter. The little girl's smile faded. The father looked up. Their eyes met for a moment. The businessman offered a thin smile and kept walking. Nothing was said. Nothing obvious occurred, but the atmosphere changed instantly. The little girl lowered her eyes toward her plate. The father noticed immediately. He placed his hand gently over hers. "Hey," he said softly, just audibly enough that Victoria could read the word on his lips from across the room. Whatever had dimmed on the little girl's face began to ease. She looked up. He smiled, and somehow that single quiet gesture carried more steadiness than anything else Victoria had witnessed all evening. "He always knows when she is sad," Noah whispered. Victoria nodded. "It seems that way." The little girl picked up her fork again, and within seconds was laughing once more, back inside her story, entirely untroubled. Whatever had threatened her peace had simply lost its power the instant she remembered she was not facing it alone. Victoria felt that recognition move through her like a current. She had spent years leading thousands of employees, solving problems that filled entire conference rooms, navigating crises that landed on the front page of industry publications. yet she could not remember the last time she had restored someone's Ella's confidence with something as simple as presence. Then movement caught her attention. Across the restaurant, a server carrying a tray paused near a table and steadied herself against a chair. Her face had gone pale. Another server stepped quickly toward her. The dining room grew quieter. Guests turned. The manager moved swiftly from the back. Victoria half rose from her seat. Before anyone else could act, the father at the corner table stood. He said something calm to his daughter and crossed the room without hurry. There was no urgency in his movement, no performance. He simply walked toward someone who needed help. He knelt beside the server and spoke quietly. Victoria could not hear the words, but she watched the effect. The young woman's shoulders dropped. Her breathing steadied. Color returned to her face. The tension in the dining room dissolved almost immediately. Several guests quietly returned to their meals. The father stood after a moment and offered the server an encouraging nod. She thanked him repeatedly. He waved it away as though it were genuinely unnecessary and returned to his table. The manager followed. "Sir," he said, genuinely moved. "Thank you. How did you know exactly what to do?" The father looked mildly embarrassed by the attention. "Because my dad used to do that every day," the little girl said before he could answer. The manager looked toward her. "Do what?" She smiled. "Help people. He used to lead emergency response teams before he became my full-time dad." The restaurant fell noticeably quieter. Even the businessmen paused. The father looked at his daughter with an expression caught somewhere between pride and gentle exasperation. "Lily," he said, "you do not have to tell everyone my life story." "It is not everyone," she replied cheerfully. "Just the whole restaurant." A ripple of laughter moved through the room. The manager smiled. "Whatever you used to do, thank you." The father nodded politely and sat back down. He did not elaborate. He did not mention accomplishments. He simply returned to his daughter and picked up their conversation exactly where they had left, as though helping people was the most ordinary thing in the world. Noah stared across the room. "Mom," he whispered, "he is a hero." Victoria looked at him. "Maybe. No, he definitely is." She looked toward the corner table again. Hero felt like too large a word, and yet strangely accurate. Not because of anything dramatic, but because of the complete absence of ego. The man had every opportunity to become the center of the evening. Instead, he seemed genuinely uninterested in being noticed. That was rarer than Victoria could easily explain. Then Noah stood up. Victoria's voice sharpened. "What are you doing?" "Saying hi." "Sit down." He froze, then slowly returned to his chair. Victoria immediately regretted the firmness in her tone. Noah rarely asked for much. He was thoughtful, patient, easy to raise despite everything he had quietly carried since his father died. She sighed. "I am sorry," she said. Noah stared at the tablecloth. "It is okay. It was not okay." She could hear the shape of his disappointment even in those 3 small words. The evening had moved past the point of ordinary observation. Victoria sat with that for a long moment. Then she made a decision. She straightened in her chair, smoothed her jacket, and stood. Noah looked up, surprised. She walked across the dining room. The piano continued somewhere behind her. The city lights shimmered through the glass. Her heart was moving faster than it had any reason to. When she reached the corner table, the father stood immediately, not because he recognized her name or her title, but simply because that was the kind of man he was. "Hello," she said. "I am Victoria, and I believe my son has been wanting to meet you all evening." The little girl, Lily, looked immediately at Noah, who had followed 2 steps behind his mother. "The waving boy," Lily announced. Noah turned red. Within seconds, the 2 of them were talking about school and books and which Chicago sports team had broken their hearts most recently. It happened effortlessly, the way children built connections before the world taught them otherwise. Victoria looked at Ethan Walker across the small table. Up close she noticed the faint lines around his eyes, the calm confidence that came from experience rather than status, the weathered quality of someone who had worked with his hands. She asked about his daughter. He answered modestly. She asked about tonight specifically. He reached into his jacket and produced a folded envelope. Lily's eyes widened. "Is that it?" "It is." She opened it carefully, both hands. "The way you handled something you had worked for. A report card." "Straight A's," Noah whispered from nearby. "Every single one," Ethan confirmed. The girl pressed the paper against her chest and beamed. "You promised." "A promise is a promise," he said. Victoria felt something press against the inside of her chest. She thought about cancelled dinners and delayed vacations and school events she had missed, because of meetings that had felt urgent at the time. Across from her sat a man who had very little by most measures of the room, yet he possessed something she had not seen all evening at any other table: presence, the ability to make another person feel like the only person in the world. And for the first time in a very long time, Victoria Hayes began to wonder whether she had been measuring the wrong things. The snow was falling more heavily outside now. The city glowed beneath a fresh layer of white. Chairs were rearranged. 2 tables became one. Noah and Lily compared drawings and traded stories. Victoria and Ethan talked with an ease she had not expected. No titles, no strategies, no carefully managed impressions. Just 2 people eating dinner. Eventually Ethan glanced at his watch and smiled at Lily. "All right, kiddo." She immediately groaned. "School still exists tomorrow." She groaned louder. Coats were gathered. The evening was ending. Victoria felt an unexpected reluctance she had not prepared for. She had attended hundreds of dinners. Most were gone from memory before morning. This one felt different, even before it had finished. She knelt beside Lily before they reached the elevator. She had not planned to. It simply happened. "Lily," she said, bringing their eyes level, "would it be all right if Noah and I had dinner with you and your dad again sometime?" Silence arrived, the kind that appears when something honest enters a room. Lily blinked twice. Then her eyes went wide. "Really? Really?" Lily immediately looked at her father. Ethan looked equally surprised. Noah practically vibrated beside Victoria. "Please say yes." The restaurant had grown very quiet. Ethan looked at his daughter, then at Noah, then at Victoria. Finally he smiled. Warm, unguarded, uncomplicated. "I think we would like that very much." Lily clapped her hands. As the father and daughter moved toward the elevator, Lily's hand slipped naturally into her father's. Victoria watched them go, not because she was looking at what they had, but because she could suddenly see, with unusual clarity, what had been quietly missing in her own days. And somewhere between the snow beyond the glass, and the laughter of 2 children, and the quiet dignity of a man who always kept his promises, 4 lives had turned gently toward something new.